Frederick Douglass was a man who changed the mind of many people all over the world about slavery and racism. He quoted that the white man's happiness cannot be purchased by the black man's misery. So if an African American or black man is doing work and getting really tired and everything, not being happy, it's not going to make a white person or his owner happy. So a little bit about Frederick Douglass is that he was a former slave, and he was also a human rights leader or an activist. He was very strong with women's rights as well as slavery and racism. And he also held many high rankings in the U.S. government and did a lot for the country as well. The North Star was one of the newspapers that he edited and published that was about anti-slavery. A little bit about his early life is that he was born around 1818. They do not know the exact date or the exact time and year, so he got to decide when he celebrated his birthday, which he chose to do so on February 14th. He was born into slavery in Talbot County, Maryland, and he was born as Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey. So his life in slavery, as I said, he was born into slavery. So right from the beginning, he had to start doing work. And at first, he lived with his grandmother, Betty Bailey, because his mom died when he was around 10 years old. He was later sent to Baltimore to live with Hugh Auld and his family. Here with Hugh Auld, Hugh's wife, Sophia, taught him the alphabet. And Hugh found it was illegal to do that because you're not supposed to teach slaves. And then when Hugh found out, he prohibited the lessons from happening, but Douglass continued to get lessons from the white children and others in the neighborhood. And he later was sent to work for Edward Covey, who was known as a slave breaker, and Covey beat and abused Douglass many times, even though he was just 16 years old. And one time it got really physical between the two, and Douglass ended up beating him, which Covey after never touched or abused Douglass again. And in slavery, he also taught many other slaves how to read and write, because through reading is where he found his drive for going against slavery and to become kind of a leader in doing that. His escape, he had 2 failed attempts at first, and then at age 20, he was able to get out with the help from Anna Murray, who was a free black woman. He actually fell in love with Anna Murray, and they got married on September 15th, 1838. And they adopted the last name of Johnson to keep his identity a secret. So it's a new life for him. They moved to New Bedford, Massachusetts, and then, which had a thriving free black community. And that's where they adopted the last name of Douglass, because he kind of wanted to have his own last name again. He wanted to have a different last name. And then after his first autobiography was published, he fled to Ireland and England because he didn't want to be recaptured by his owner. In Ireland and England, he talked to the people about slavery and his thoughts on racism and how he wanted it to end. And after 2 years, he wanted to go back to the U.S., but the people, his British supporters, decided to raise money for him to be able to be a free man when going back to the United States. And in 1847, he returned to the U.S. as a free man. And he wrote 3 autobiographies: The Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave, My Bondage and My Freedom, and Life and Times of Frederick Douglass, which all were seen as classics of American autobiographies. And his first speech was at the Mass Anti-Slavery Society's annual convention in Nantucket, which was kind of a big step for him. Some of his accomplishments or his jobs were that he edited many newspapers. He was the president of Freedmen's Bank. He was a marshal, a recorder of deeds for Washington, D.C., the charge d'affaires for Santo Domingo, which he was in charge of all the matters that went on in the country, and he was also the minister to Haiti. So as a black man in these times, he was able to hold many high ranks in the U.S. government. And how this is all relevant today. Today you see more equality around the world, and although there are still many problems with slavery and racism, it's getting better day to day. And he said that right is of no sex, truth is of no color, and God is the Father of us all, and we are all brethren.
Right.